Hey, everybody. Today, we are going to go through a deep dive of the calendars in High Level, including the service menu, using rooms, and using equipment. The calendars are extremely powerful and important for most of the accounts that we work with. So we're going to go ahead and give a complete rundown of everything you need to know. If you are using one of my snapshots, you are going to already have calendars created and loaded into your account. So the core appointment snapshot is that base snapshot that I recommend for any of my students who are a service-based business. They use any type of appointment in their sales process. That might be a phone call, Zoom call, in-person meeting, at-home estimate, something of that nature. If you have the core appointment snapshot, you are going to have 3 calendars already inside. You're going to have this follow-up appointment. You will have a consultation, and then you're going to have an initial call calendar. We're going to go through how to update those names. We're going to go through the settings in the calendars, as well as groups, service menus, rooms, and equipment. Now, if we already have calendars inside, we are going to see that there is a status. They're going to be either draft or active. So this is a new calendar that I created, which we're going to go through in this tutorial. You need to make sure that any of the calendars you're using are turned on. So in order to do that, we're going to click on the action dropdown and we're going to click on activate calendar. We can also share the calendar. We can duplicate the calendar, edit that. We can move it to a group or delete it. So we're going to go ahead and start with trying to edit this initial consultation calendar. And so name of calendar, we'll start there. This is really important because the consumer or the contact or the potential lead, they do see the name of this calendar. So you want to make sure that you use this name intentionally. In the core appointment snapshot, 2 of our calendars are named using custom values. And that's because we do as much as we can with the custom values to make editing the snapshot as easy as possible. You are absolutely able to keep the name with the custom value, knowing that this name will be updated based on what you put in that custom value, or you can edit it directly in the calendar. There's really nothing wrong with doing that. We're also going to see what group it's in. So we've got our initial/consultation group. This is just in regular calendars. We can see the duration. So each calendar in High Level can only be set to a single duration. You cannot have one calendar that is a half an hour, 90 minutes, etc. You will have to create a new calendar for every new duration of the appointment. So that is a really important thing to keep in mind. We also have multiple calendar types, which we're about to go through in a minute. We've got round robin and we have services. So there are several different things you're going to want to consider when it comes to selecting the right type of calendar for you. We've covered our status and then the date that it was updated. If we want to create a new calendar, we're going to click at the top right, but for now, we're going to go through and start editing these calendars we already have set up. So I'm going to start with this one. This is one of the biggest issues that I see when people are editing calendars that already exist if they are round robin. So let's go in here and let's just try and edit this name. We're going to call it Dental Implant Discovery Call Calendar. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Then I'm going to close it. But oh no, my name is still with the custom value. Why did that happen? The primary reason is because with a round robin calendar, you have to have a user assigned. So if you've loaded in a snapshot that has a round robin calendar, there is no user assigned because it's not taking users from the previous account and loading them into your account. So we cannot edit anything until we add a user. So we're going to go ahead and in here and we're going to say dental implant initial discovery call. We're going to leave the description. So this description is also visible to that end user. Again, we use custom values for this. If you want to add a more detailed description, definitely do that. When somebody hits the calendar page, they may not be sold on the fact that they want this appointment yet. You want to use every single option at your disposal to sell them on the benefits of this appointment. So use this description in a way that really shows them what they are going to get from this appointment. Even if it's a sales appointment, there should be something of value that you are providing to that person, and go ahead and put that in here. You also want to make sure it's really clear where this appointment takes place. So if this is a phone call versus Zoom call versus an in-person appointment, make sure you put all those details here. Now we've got a custom URL. You can customize this slug if you choose. This is going to be either the MSG-SNDR domain that you will see with HighLevel's default domains, or it's going to be the API domain that you set up in the agency level settings. That being said, I never use these. We are always going to embed a calendar on a page so that the page looks nice. We've got a logo, we've got other design elements on there. We have a URL, we have more control over the visuals and the tracking codes and things like that. So edit this if you want to. It is not required if you are going to be embedding this on a page. This is not a URL I'd want to send to someone. Now we've got our meeting invite title. So we already talked about the calendar name. This is visible on the calendar, but our meeting invite title is what someone is going to see on their calendar if they book this appointment. This will be what shows up in their calendar. So we use custom values. Again, it's going to be their name plus your business's name, which we have in a custom value in case it is different than what your sub account is named. And then this is going to be basically the description or this initial call name custom value. So I'm going to leave it like that. This is the structure I recommend. It helps you know who your appointment's with. It helps them know who the appointment's with. And then it helps them understand what this appointment is actually for. So now we get into this user or team member option. So this was the reason it didn't save when I tried to save that name. We need to select a team member before we can save this. So now that I've selected Trisha, I can say, okay, she's a high priority, low, or medium priority. These are only available if you select optimize for availability. Because if you're optimizing for availability, it's going to allow the contact to select the availability that works best for them. And if there are 3 people who are available at that same time, it's going to use the priority to determine who gets that appointment. We also need to put that meeting location in here if we choose, but we can say this is the full address of the location, or this is the phone number of the location. This is Google Meet. This is Zoom, which again, we have to integrate those to use those options. And then we can have custom where you can type in a PMI or personal meeting ID as well. If we want to optimize for equal distribution, we can select that here. You can see that there is now no priority. We do have these options available as well, and we want to go ahead and select those. This is going to be the event color on the calendar itself. So these are the basic settings, okay? We're going to go ahead and save these. It doesn't close out our settings, but we now actually updated the name of this calendar. So we can see that reflected here. Now we've got our availability. This is the overarching availability for this calendar. If this is a round robin calendar, which it is in this example, this needs to be the total availability that anyone on the calendar is going to have. And what I mean by that is, if your business is open from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, you're going to set this availability 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Even if Trisha only works 12 to 3, and then Sally only works 10 to 5, and then Joe works 9 to 1, okay? The total availability is 9 to 5. Based on the user that is selected, it's going to be pulling from their individual availability. So that is how the round robin calendars work. We need to make sure that the overarching hours are selected, knowing that the individual user's availability will actually be what is taken into account when someone is scheduling. If you are doing a regular calendar or an individual calendar, this is also the same, but it's not going to be round robin. So there's only one person that's typically going to be assigned to this and we're not going to assign it in the same way, but we need to make sure that, again, the overarching availability is selected, or at least whatever you want that availability to be, but we can still make sure that it's checking a Google or Outlook calendar for the actual availability. We would just select the days that we want. And let's say we go 9. Cool. If I want to copy this to all, it's going to add all of the times. Okay. If I want to change this to 11 a.m. to 5 on Sunday, we can do that. So we can do them individually, or we can copy those to all of them. If we want to remove days, we're going to do it just like that. Now we get to decide, is this a recurring meeting? So if this is a recurring meeting for your business, go ahead and turn that on. Now we've got our actual availability settings. Meeting interval means how many options on the calendar do they see when they're booking. So for example, if we have 30-minute intervals, they would see 1 p.m. available, 1:30 p.m., 2:30. So the options presented to them are in 30-minute increments. If something is booked, they're not going to see that, but they will be presented with those options in 30-minute increments. This really depends on, 1, personal preference, and 2, how long is this meeting? If you have a 45-minute meeting, you might want 15-minute increments to allow your calendar to be fully booked. For example, for us, our meetings are 45 minutes, but we oftentimes will need 1 hour. So we have 45-minute duration, but we might have 60-minute increments. So we're still allowing people to book on the hour, essentially. This is really based on how your sales process operates, but this is really important. The meeting intervals and meeting durations matter a lot. Meeting duration is simply how long is this appointment? Minimum scheduling notice. This is going to be how soon is someone able to book with you. So if we had a 12-hour meeting increment, that means that if this is 5 p.m. in the afternoon, I'm not going to see any availability before 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. There might not be any availability between 5 and 5. So let's say it's 12 p.m. on a Monday. We're not going to see any availability show up before 12 p.m. on Tuesday, even if 9, 10, and 11 are open. So this, in certain ways, depends on how full you want your calendars. We personally set ours to 1 hour. That's because if somebody has to cancel an appointment, we would love for someone else to be able to fill that as quickly as possible and maximize our time. If you are concerned that you are not going to see that in time, then you probably want to set it something more like 12 hours, 24 hours. Some people do 48 hours, depending on what it is. So this is up to you, but that is what that means. Date range is how many days are shown on the calendar for someone to be able to book. That does take into account the weekends. So even if you do not work the weekends and Saturday and Sunday are not included on your calendar, it is still taking those days into account. So 7 days is relatively solid for most businesses. However, you might want to open it up to 30 days, depending on the type of business you are. You might want to keep it as low as 3 or 4 days, depending on the type of business you are. Keep in mind that the tighter the date range, the lower the chances of having somebody no-show or lose excitement if this is a sales appointment. But just depending on the type of business that you are, you might need to adjust this. Maximum bookings per day. You can leave this blank, or you can set, this is the most that I want. So let's say they're 15-minute increments. So you can fit a lot of 15-minute calls in one day. You might say, I want 10. That's the most that I want. If you are doing 1-hour appointments, the most anybody is likely going to be able to do is 8 in a day anyway. So again, you can leave it blank or you can put something in there, and that is based on your personal preference. Maximum bookings per slot per user. This is typically always going to remain as 1. However, if one person could handle 2 appointments at the same time, you could go ahead and select this. This is something that we don't really need anymore with some of the new calendar options, but this is there for you if you want to add that. Buffer time is basically going to add a period of time before and after your appointments. Let's say you want a 15-minute buffer before and after your appointments, maybe to account for drive time. You can go ahead and put that. But keep in mind that if you add a buffer, it is going to significantly reduce the number of spots that are available to be booked on that calendar. We do not use buffers. We actually just structure our calendar in a way that gives us those natural buffers because it will add it before and after the appointment. And that is going to take up quite a bit of time. So once we get down through availability, we've got our forms and payments option. We can select a form. So there is a default form that is connected to the calendar. Every calendar has a form connected to it. The default is just collecting first name, last name, email, phone number, and notes. We add specific options in our snapshots. So our form is called calendar booking. We're going to go ahead and select calendar booking. If you want to be able to add guests to the appointment, you can do that here. If we want to have a confirmation message, we're going to select default. I always recommend a redirect URL. Hitting a thank you page is a benefit. It gives you an opportunity to more thoroughly explain what it was that they booked, what's going to happen next, what they need to do now, what to expect moving forward. So do not squander that opportunity. It is going to lead to higher show. So we use custom values for this, again, in our snapshots just to make it easier. So as long as you fill in the URL of the thank you page in this custom value, you don't need to do anything. But if you're not using one of my snapshots, just put your URL here. You also can add your Facebook Pixel ID. However, you don't need to. As I mentioned, we are going to be embedding these calendars onto pages. That is what I recommend. Our Pixel ID or our Pixel base code is going to be inside of that funnel or that page. So we don't technically need this. However, if you plan on just sharing this calendar link directly with no page associated, then this is where you would want to put your Pixel ID. And then we can auto-confirm new calendar meetings. So if you are a business that has accurate availability shown on the calendar, you can keep this on. I've worked with many businesses that maybe they want to allow people to self-schedule or at least attempt to self-schedule, but they're not able to manage all of their availability directly in high level. So what we recommend is they do a booking request calendar. A booking request is saying, hey, here's the date and time I'd like to have my appointment. But we do not auto-confirm those. We do not treat them as confirmed appointments in the system. So they're not going to get a confirmation and reminders. It's going to say, hey, thanks for requesting your date and time. We're going to review the availability. We're going to get back to you and let you know if this time is in fact going to work out. So if that is your situation, you're going to turn this off and then you're going to go ahead and save. However, in this specific account that I'm in right now, we do have a challenge of not being able to tie into the surgical scheduling software. But what we're going to do is we're going to set aside a block of days and hours within those days for consultations. So we know that those times are going to be free on the actual scheduling calendar, and they're going to be booked inside the high-level calendar. So that gives us the availability to be able to do that without worrying about trying to tie these two softwares together. So there's really always a workaround when it comes to calendars. Sometimes you just have to get creative. So then we get to the notifications and additional options. So we can say what type of notification. The only option is acknowledgement email. But who's going to get that? You could say assigned users, additional emails. So if you are going to turn on additional emails, I think that's a great option. We don't typically do the contact because our workflows are already set up to send them the confirmation and the reminders. So we're not going to do that, but you can select these as it makes sense to you. If you want to alert additional email addresses, this might be the manager's email. So it's not the person who is getting their calendar booked on. That person is going to be notified under the assigned user option. Additional emails would be someone else that wants to know about that. So allow Google Calendar to send invitation and update emails. I recommend turning that on. Assign contacts to their respective calendar team member each time an appointment is booked. definitely recommend turning that on. Skip assigning contact if the contact already has an assigned user. I don't like that because basically anytime somebody books with a person, that really needs to be their new point of contact. So we're going to keep that off. I allow rescheduling, but I do not allow cancellation. I want someone to have to reach out if they need to cancel. That way we can find out what is the reason that you are canceling. And now we've got customizations. We can do calendar cover image. This can be an image that you actually upload into that calendar. This is fine if you want to do that. We also can just create a page design for the calendar if we choose. Then we've got the different calendar widgets, okay? The customization of those calendars only works with the Neo widget. So if we don't want those, we can select Classic. You can still keep it on Neo by default, even if you're not changing things. But this is going to be our colors of the buttons, the dates, times, etc. Background colors here. What does the button say on the meeting? Schedule meeting. It could say something different. Then these are the pieces of information that are going to be turned on. You can turn it off if you don't want people to see those. Okay, that is an option. I typically would just keep those turned on and make sure that you name those calendars, keeping in mind that people are going to be able to see them. Now, we can also turn on staff selection. This is going to work with the round robin calendars because there are multiple staff members that are going to be assigned potentially. So if we want to allow staff selection, we can go ahead and turn that on. That would look somewhat similar to one of the other calendars that we're going to go through in just a minute. So now I hit save, and then we've got dental implant initial discovery call calendar, and that has been updated. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click on activate calendar so that now I can actually use that in a specific calendar. That's going to be the same process that you go through for these other calendars. However, there is a different style of calendar that you can choose. These are our different calendar styles. A service calendar is going to be great for a service-based business. This is a newer functionality in calendars, and I think it's amazing. This is perfect for a salon, for example. You've got a haircut, you've got a color, you have got a waxing or a facial. That's going to allow people to select the service and then go ahead and book on that without having to do a bunch of workarounds like we used to have to do. So if you are a business that wants to allow your prospects to actually schedule their core service, you are going to select service calendar. If you want a simple calendar, which this was the only calendar type that we had in the past, this is an unassigned calendar. So there is not one individual that's assigned to this calendar, but there is one calendar that is synced with this calendar. So for example, my personal Gmail can still be synced with this simple calendar, even though I as a person am not assigned to it. But I also can take this simple calendar and assign that to myself in the My Profile settings. So you can still assign these calendars, but they are not based on the user being selected on that calendar, and you can never have more than one schedule associated with that calendar. Round robin is what we just went through. Class booking is for something, say like a class. You could actually do a webinar model if you wanted to with the class booking, or this is great for a business that actually holds classes. You can say this one time slot, we can fit 25 people in this class. You can go ahead and do that class booking here. And then collective booking is also really cool. So this can be more than one person on the calendar, and you're trying to sync up the availability. For example, you've got a certain call or appointment that needs multiple team members available on that call. This is only going to show that specific availability that works for both parties. We are going to be going over service menus, groups, rooms, and equipments for your high-level calendar. These are some newer features available to high-level users that are really going to change the game for a lot of different businesses. For example, I have a client who has a massage therapy business. They also have a sauna. They also have different cupping machines that can be used during the massage. And so for them, their big challenge was, I only have a certain number of rooms for the sauna. I only have a certain set of cupping machines. So what I need to make sure is that when somebody's booking, that I don't promise them equipment or rooms that are not available. This is something that you were able to do in things like Acuity, but they were not available in High Level until recently. This is also really great for a business like a salon that's got cuts and color and facials and all of those different services that they want to present to their clients in a really simple way. So in the past, we would do a workaround for this. We would still have all of these calendars created and we would basically build our own services page, but we no longer have to do that. So in order to get your service menu together, we are going to need to create a couple of different things. So we're going to have groups that are created, and then we also will need associated calendars. So if I want to create a service menu, I'm going to go to Create Service Menu. I'm going to give this a name. So we will call this Dental Implant Maintenance. And then this is going to be Maintenance Services for your dental implants. We'll call this Dental Implant Maintenance. And if that slug is not available, it's going to let you know. So these are basically slugs that have been used in anyone else's High Level account, but don't focus too much on these because, like I've said previously, we're going to be embedding these calendars into pages. And so these slugs are not really going to be relevant at that point. We're going to have the page URLs that we are able to share. We also can turn on the consent checkbox. I'd recommend that you do this to stay in compliance with A2P. And then we've got our confirmation page, which is going to be the same as our regular calendars. Do we want a default thank you message, or do we want to redirect them to a URL? So if you've watched my other videos, you know that I recommend a redirect URL always. Going to be a better experience for that client. It's also going to help you get more data. So we would do a redirect URL, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to leave it at default. And if we want any additional custom code, we can select it there. Now we've got our services, okay? So we have to have groups and then calendars assigned to those groups in order to select them. So I've set up a default dental implant group, and the dental implant maintenance calendar is in that group. So if you have multiple services, go ahead and add those groups in the Groups tab. Go ahead and add those calendars in the Calendars tab, and then you move those calendars into the groups. Then we can arrange the services. I only have one in this example, so we don't need to arrange them, but you are just going to drag and drop using this 2-line menu on the left. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now I've got my services menu right here. If you have rooms, then we are going to go ahead and set up those rooms. So how many people can use a room at one time? So if we go ahead and hit edit, these are the basic settings. There's not a lot that you need to do here. You need to name it, give it a description, say what is the capacity, how many people can fit in this room, and then what is the calendar that relates to that service. That way, it's going to prevent somebody from booking on that same calendar at that same time if they are using that room so that you do not overextend yourself. Equipment is very similar. So we've got dental implant tools that we set up here. How many sets of dental implants tools do we have? In this example, I've listed 2. So if we go into edit, we are going to say, what are the tools or equipment? What's the description? And then how many do we have? And then what is the out of service quantity? So it will no longer allow this to be booked with if we have more than 2. And then what calendar is that associated with? So in order to do this, like I mentioned, you have to have all of these options selected. We've got to have our calendars. We've got to have our groups. So you can create your group right here. And then in order to move a calendar into a group, we're going to click on this and we're going to go move to group. Right now it's unassigned. We are going to put that in the dental implants group. We'll go ahead and select that. So now I've got my calendars and my groups taken care of, and then we've got our service menu. So for this one, again, we've already gone through and we have selected this service. Then we've got that one service right here. We'll go ahead and hit save. Our rooms are related to the calendars. Our equipment is related to the calendars. So now you can embed this service menu into your funnel page in High Level so that you have a complete service menu that your clients can go ahead and see. They can book on really easily, and it will prevent you from using more rooms than you have available and more equipment that you have available in this new setup. I think this is going to be an incredible tool for so many service-based businesses out there. If you have any additional questions on how to use service menus, rooms, or equipment in your calendar setup, definitely let me know and I'm happy to help.